going to start for the board because this is the first meeting of the select board after the election. I want to welcome new member John Riley and welcome back Josh. So congratulations, gentlemen. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
I'll review the agenda. We're going to have the review of the agenda now and announcements, public comment period, and then the board will reorganize, and I'll hand the gavel over to the new chair of the board. We'll have the town manager's report where we will consider ratifying my appointment of Ed Sheridan as acting police lieutenant. We'll discuss town council whether to renew or consider a change. We will review the timeline for 24/7 coverage of the fire department. We'll discuss insurance coverage for Chapter 111F injuries with regards to payroll. We'll review the new OSHA regulations for the highway department. And hopefully we'll approve a one-day liquor license for the Groton Conservation Trust for the annual Sunset event on June 13th. Representatives from the Groton-Dunstable Regional School District will be here to talk about the MSBA reimbursement and clarify the parameters of the project. Under other business, we'll continue the discussion on adopting a policy for select board meeting end time. We'll do our ongoing issues, and we will go over some minutes. So before we get into public comment period, I think we should probably reorganize the board first. So opening up, we'll accept nominations for the position of chair. Are there any nominations?
Yes, I nominate Allison Manoogian for chair.
Are there any other nominations? Being none, I'd ask the board to vote Allison Manoogian as chair. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So next on the agenda would be electing
a vice chair. Do you have any nominations for vice chair?
Yes. I'd like to nominate Josh Deegan for vice chair.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Clerk, Madam Chair.
Yes, and this is when it gets contentious. Would anyone like to nominate someone to serve as clerk?
I will nominate John Riley.
Good. I second.
It's kind of a tradition, John.
I was gonna say, I have a nomination. Anyone else?
Are you good at taking notes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got one right here for you.
All right. All in favor of John Riley serving as our clerk for the coming year? Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
It's your first no vote.
Unfortunately, the majority of the board has decided it shall be so. Alrighty. So now that that's finished, announcements. Who has announcements? Or anyone with random thoughts?
I have an announcement, and it's gonna really sound like a random thought, but after many years of living in town, it's been like 28 years, and serving in many capacities in elected positions and working as a landscape contractor and being outside, you get caught up in life, and all of a sudden everything's busy, everything's a job. You don't get to appreciate where you are and what's going on. And when you stop and you get out of your own way and you get to take a look around life and you see what a beautiful town we live in, and how while it's growing and development is going on, it's being done in such a really planned and cool way. And then you, being somebody that deals with trees and plants all the time, it's like, I kind of get lost in it. It's just a business. Yeah, I'll sell you a tree, I'll sell you a plant. But when you look at the beauty of where we live, the trees that are there, and then you walk outside your front door on the way to the select board meeting, and you see your scallions are flowering, and you're covered with purple flowers, and you grab one on the way, and you eat it. And now your mouth tastes like onions. And that's how New England works, and I know that was really random, but just stop and do something different and appreciate where we are. And we got a new board, a new year, and let's hope it all goes smooth. So there's my random thought.
Very good. Thank you.
Could I add to that?
Yeah.
So I shared this with some people when we were on Memorial Day up at the top of the mound in the cemetery. A couple of years ago, the Historical Society included something that former Governor Boutwell had written near the end of his life about how when he was young and first active in Groton, that mound that is so covered now with beautiful, mature trees, including beech trees, which grow really, really slowly, was totally barren, and how unpleasant it was, and how pleased he was that the citizens of Groton had decided to put some effort into planting trees up there, and he had lived long enough to see some of them really start growing. And I thought, it was such a surprise to me because it is so beautiful and so tree covered, and I never gave it a second thought. But it just shows that the kinds of things that we do with our environment matter, and they last, and they do contribute to that beauty that we are surrounded by.
Very good. We'll move to public comment. Anyone wish to bring anything to our attention? Alrighty. We have reorganized. Are we going just into the town manager's report as it
Absolutely.
stands?
Yep.
Okay.
So, you'll notice the side of this room is very packed, and it is for good reason. As you know, our deputy chief has been offered an opportunity to go to the FBI Academy for 6 months for some training opportunities that I think will be very beneficial for the town of Groton. So we're very happy that Jim's able to do that. But in the meantime, there are some administrative duties that need to be covered. So Chief Luth came to me and asked if it would be possible to create the position of acting lieutenant. And he recommended that we appoint Ed Sheridan, Sergeant Sheridan, as our acting lieutenant. I couldn't think of, well, we have many fine officers. Ed has served in the role as lieutenant in the previous position that he's had. He's been a sergeant since I appointed him in 2012, and he does a great job. And I think by the turnout tonight, he has the great respect from our employees and our police officers. So it's with great pleasure that I appoint Ed as acting lieutenant for 6 months while Jim is gone. And I think he's gonna be doing a great job, and I know Mike highly recommends him. So I'd ask the board to consider ratifying that appointment this evening. Mike, I don't know if there's anything else you wanna?
No, I was gonna actually say the same thing for the department to show up like this for an acting position, says volumes. And, Ed has the respect of his, fellow employees, his supervisors, and pretty much everybody he comes in contact with. And I couldn't be happier to have him as the acting lieutenant.
Yes, John.
I'll make a motion.
Very good.
I move that we ratify the town manager's appointment of Sergeant Sheridan to be the acting lieutenant until the deputy chief returns from his training activities with the FBI.
Is there a second?
I'd second that.
Alrighty. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, acting lieutenant.
Congratulations.
Yes.
I mean, that's
Thank you, everybody. Glad to see you all here tonight. So, last meeting before the election, I brought the issue to the select board on whether or not you want to continue with current town council, or whether or not you want to consider a change. You asked for the last 3 years' worth of legal costs, and I know I got an email late this afternoon from Allison that it was very confusing to follow. But the issue was I tried to give you what we spent with our previous town council. We spent $48,000 in fiscal 17, including labor. We spent $43,485 in fiscal 18, and I've given you a summary here of what we've spent so far this year between labor and general town council litigation services this year. And right now, we're at $117,485 through April 2019. You got a bill tonight for $3,100 from KP that came in after we put this list together for litigation in April. So that's up to $37,600. So we're up over $120,000 in legal costs
That
this
invoice
year.
was from KP or from Brooks?
KP, that was $3,100 for labor for KP. It was in your packet tonight
Yep,
that you
understood.
signed off on. So that puts us up to $120,000 this year. So the question from the board is how you want to move on this year, whether or not you want to continue with Brooks Durensis for fiscal year 20. You want to consider a change. I've asked some of our department heads to be here tonight to answer questions or provide their feedback on working with council so far this year. I know that Paul is here tonight as well, and I will turn the discussion over to the board.
All right. So as Mark had mentioned, I emailed him this afternoon, and I was struggling to kind of compare apples to apples. And I don't know whether others were able to do so more successfully than I was. I still have not been able to really get something that I feel like is a fair not fair, but a logical comparison across the board. I know, Mark, too, that we had asked for input from boards. I don't think we've seen any of that.
I did have one email I had forwarded to the board, I believe, a few months ago from the Sewer Commission expressing some concern. I did ask some of the department heads representing those boards to be here tonight to answer questions that the board may have.
And so my third concern actually relates to that, in that I feel like there's a little bit of a difficult position here in asking folks to potentially outline concerns and difficulties they've had with a vendor that we may choose to retain. So I don't know. My feeling as an individual is that I'm not sure we have the information to have a logical discussion and move forward. Certainly if other members want to weigh in on that,
I will provide the board
Can I
with
try and
everything
help you with that?
you can.
Because I did take a look at this.
Yeah.
So the first question I have for Mark, and I should have asked you earlier, and I apologize that
That's
I
okay.
didn't, is not the current year with Brooks and Durensis as serving as our regular council in general, and then having Copeland and Page serve as our labor council. That's what our current arrangement is.
That is correct.
In previous 2 years before this, we had Copeland and Page serving as our legal and our general counsel.
Correct.
Our labor and general counsel. So you showed numbers of 40-something odd $1,000 in the 2 previous years?
Correct.
And how much litigation occurred during those 2 years?
If you look at the cost, general legal in fiscal year 20, that includes the retainer and litigation. The retainer for general legal is $1,250 a month. And then everything was billed out at $170 an hour. The same with labor, $1,250 retainer for general questions, and then anything in which they had to participate, whether it be a union negotiations or anything like that, was billed out separately.
So
So
the
the-
24,592 is
Yep.
the number that was basically within, what was included within the retainer and what we paid against it?
The retainer and litigation. So $1,250 times 12 was the retainer, and then whatever was left is the litigation.
So in a given year, whether it's 12 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 years in the future,
Yep.
we never know what litigation costs are gonna be.
That is correct.
Okay, and those litigation costs are negotiated on an hourly rate, no matter who our vendor is.
Correct.
However, within the retainer, under general legal.
Josh, it was $9,000 worth of litigation last fiscal year.
Okay, so basically, if there was $9,000 and you take that off of the $43,000, that gets you to $34,000.
Correct.
All right, so if you look at that year and you look at previous years, we were paying $34,000. The wild card on any given year is always gonna be collective bargaining in terms of labor costs, because we have to pay for that for legal, as well as any lawsuits that happen. So you can't look at 1 year as an anomaly and say that we've spent $117,000, when, or you can, but what you need to look at is that the number really is about $34,000 that we spent on retainer.
Yep.
Would you agree with that?
Yep, 30,000, yep.
And through April of 2019, using our current council, which is 9 months through, we've spent $36,000. So we're ahead of last year, and we have, presumably, if that number stays the same, that would be another third of that number.
Yep.
So that would get us up to $48,000.
Yep.
So it's 48,000 versus 35,000, and that's the analysis this board needs to make, and it's as simple as that.
Yeah, you paid
Do you follow- Do
18,000.
you follow that
You
logic,
paid-
everybody?
you
I'm
paid-
trying
Yes,
to
but
cut
I think
right down
it
to
needs to
size.
be presented to us.
I just did.
No, we need a piece of paper that shows year one retainer, litigation, labor retainer, additional labor.
I can outline that for you if you want. But basically, you spend This year, you spent $18,000 more in retainer than you did last year. You're gonna spend $18,000 more in retainer, because we pay $4,000 a month versus $2,500 a month. So that's $18,000. And then last year, you had a very light year, you only had $9,000 in litigation. And you had another $3,000 in outside labor. Because of that $18,893 in labor costs, $15,000 was retainer. Okay? So that alone shows that now we spent this fiscal year in labor $34,000 because we don't have a retainer anymore. So everything was billed out at $190 an hour.
So if we had had a retainer, that portion of the labor
It might have been
cost-
less.
It would be what?
It would be less.
How much less?
Well, 15,000 would have been the retainer. So, I have to look at the hours to see what would have been.
Because that's where the analysis is
Yep.
right there, is the difference between what the retainer was for the previous 2 fiscal years and the conscious decision this board made to change council, knowing that the retainer cost was gonna go up.
Yep.
The wild cards is what we need to look at, and those are, in any given year, I'll say it 9 times on Sunday, we don't know what litigation's gonna be.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
as well as things on the labor side. And I see a lot of head bobbing going on.
Well, I want to apologize to Allison and the board. We met on Wednesday, the 22nd, I believe. Wednesday, the 22nd is when you met last. No, Wednesday, the 22nd. No, Wednesday, the 15th. No, the 22nd. Whenever you met, your
You're
last
arguing with
meeting.
yourself.
I am arguing with myself.
We met the night before the election. We met on a Monday. It was the 20th.
I believe it was Wednesday, I believe.
We met on Monday,
we
the
met on the Monday
20th.
following that.
But that was executive session.
Yeah, and then you didn't you meet on the Wednesday?
No, we met the previous Wednesday, the 15th.
Oh, Wednesday the 15th. But then town council came in on that meeting on the 20th, and then the board asked me to get additional information. That was on Wednesday the 22nd, I believe. I don't believe you met on Monday the 20th.
Yes, we did, the night
Well, yeah, but that
before
was,
the election.
So at our recent meeting,
regardless, I didn't have enough time, and then I was on vacation, so I didn't have enough time to do the detailed analysis that you wanted me to do, and I apologize for that. So if you want to give me another week,
Let's
I will.
ask them to do something specific then. Can we do that? Do you mind if I try?
no, give it a go.
All right, so take a look at the previous 3 fiscal years, not 2, and see what the retainer was. What was included within retainer, what was outside of retainer, and then give us a detailed breakdown of what was outside of retainer with previous council. Then take a look at what you've already kind of done, is current council, year-to-date, retainer billed, and then breakdown of all litigation costs for all the various cases and everything we've got going on, not just on the litigation side, but on the labor side that we've paid KMP. And only doing that can you do an analysis against what the cost would have been for the previous years, especially if you know what KMP's rate was for litigation. You can just apply, and it's a simple math formula, Mark. I mean, it's
It's just going through all
complicated.
those bills, and you want me to figure out what was in the retainer versus what was in litigation?
Yeah, because if you're gonna show
Anything
that,
in the retainer is outside of litigation. So it could be,
Everything.
it could be 1,000 hours in a
not real
given month.
estate,
No, not real estate, but it
Not
could be
real estate.
1,000 hours of time that we only got billed $1,250 for. You see what I'm saying?
no.
When town council gave us the retainer bill, if he put in 1,000 hours, we got billed $1,250 on general litigation.
If it was.
General
for-
labor,
If
general
it
legal
was
labor.
for not for labor related things, or for real estate related things, or for litigation related things. All of those things, correct?
Correct. Anything that had to do with general
Zoning
questions.
or any
Correct.
writing, all
Town
that
meeting
stuff.
preparation, writing warrant articles, writing motions, answering general opinion questions that weren't litigation related,
Mm-hmm.
got covered in the retainer. So if it was 1,000 hours in a particular month, we still only got billed
Aren't we in that
$1,250.
situation still, though?
But we're
But
still-
now it's $4,000 for just general legal. Labor's being built out at $190 an hour. Before, general labor that wasn't associated with collective bargaining or just basic questions, we did not get charged hourly, we got charged $1,250 a month. So we've gone from a $2,500 a month retainer that covered legal, general legal and labor, to a $4,000 retainer that only covered general legal, and then all labor was built out at $190 an hour. I hope that's clear.
So just, let me finish.
It's not
I know there's
clear.
other questions. So the bottom line is, right now,
I don't mean to- I'm sorry.
labor that we've paid to KMP year to date is,
34,500.
$34,000.
34,500.
and if you did a breakdown of where that was, I would bank on it that 70% of that number was not under general labor.
I'm gonna say that it's probably more like 50%.
Okay, so these also have to
Yep.
be included within your analysis, is my only point, because if you.
I'm gonna
if this
need more
is
than a week.
all about doing numbers and making this a numbers-based decision, then looking at the numbers, we've blown our budget upside down and inside out. But looking at it from a philosophical perspective as to who represents us is what we need to decide, and you have to be able to compare the two things side by side, and that's a tough thing to do. I'm done, I'm sorry.
I think looking at money is one aspect, but service is another aspect. And if the board wants written testimony instead of verbal testimony, I can do that. Is that what you're getting at before, Allison?
I think that that's my personal preference. I don't know how others feel.
Yes.
I
I
think it's
agree.
much
Okay.
easier to have all of the information in front of us, be able
Okay.
to review it in advance and then discuss it.
Understood.
John?
I've got a number of questions. I don't at all disagree with what Josh just said, but there's some things on here that I just think need some explanation also. We show $5,000 in litigation on Indian Hill, and I have no idea what that's related to.
I can talk about that.
Well, I don't know if you want to talk about it or you want to put it down so we have all this in writing.
Okay.
I see a labor line in here, and I don't know whose labor that is. Is it PK Law? Where does that
No.
labor come from?
No, if
That's
the
all
board
Brooks
asked
Durensis.
Brooks Durensis a labor question and didn't go to KP, we got billed out at $190 an hour.
Okay, so this is.
And it would have been the
KP.
same cost if we had gone to KP, because they would have billed us out
up there.
at $190.
It's Brooks and Durensis up there.
Yeah. Okay,
So you
So-
want a written explanation on the Indian Hill piece?
yes, I think so. I
Yep.
mean, does anyone else have any
I
idea
had
what
that
that
same
was about?
question, but I had it about all of the things that are listed as litigation. I don't understand the others either.
Oh, well, I'm not through.
Okay.
Sorry. The Lawrence Johnson,
Yep.
this is one where we've got this whole issue about how much cost our current council incurred for work that should have been done by KP.
And if you ask KP, they'll give you a different response
Well,
to
of
that.
course they will, okay?
They-
But nevertheless, the fact on the table is this work had to be done.
Yep.
And we've spent $30,000 on it so far. In just that one piece of litigation alone. What is the litigation AAG compliance agreement? What is that about?
You remember when the Attorney General, there was a complaint filed on the way we did procurement with regards to Fitch's Bridge and the AG? There was a complaint filed to the AG, and the AG required us to do a compliance agreement?
Mm-hmm.
That's what that is.
That, you may need to help everyone else. And then I see litigation for O'Sullivan, a subpoena.
Yep.
Where's that coming from?
Well, what ended up happening is one of our vendors had a issue that they were dealing with, and they wanted all the payroll records, and they subpoenaed me to go with the payroll records. Of course, we went to town council and asked for advice on how to handle that.
Okay, but this is a piece of litigation I don't think the board has any knowledge of yet. And then I go down to KP Law and I look at July in 2018, and all of a sudden, there's a whopping $16,650 charge in July. And when I go back and look at your numbers, this really was for work done in June or
No.
before June.
It was, no, that work is both general town council services as well as labor for that month. KP was still our attorney, but we did not have a retainer agreement with them. So everything they did that month was $190, billed out at $190 an hour, and there was an investigation that was done by them in that month, which I'm sure you remember.
okay, but that's all a bit of out of the ordinary here in terms of trying to compare.
In July, that's why July was a tough month. I agree with that. But we
And,
put that all under the KP $34,000.
and now I don't find in here, we have I think it's, we're $300 over, so it's 10,300 something for, our, for the investigators for the,
They capped that at 10,000, so their most recent invoice has a credit back to the $10,000. I don't think that's.
but I don't see
clear
that
in any way.
accounted for anywheres in here.
There's a
I don't
different
believe so.
firm, a different law firm, so it's
That's
not
not
there.
either of these firms.
Beg your pardon?
That's that's Mead, Tellem, and Acosta.
Yes, but
Right,
when
but
we,
it's a-
but when we show the total legal expense for the year,
True,
and we don't include that.
That's not a lawyer. I mean, just because it's okay,
it's a lawyer.
it is a lawyer.
Yeah,
We didn't hire
absolutely. I
them as,
hope it is.
excuse
We
me,
paid
we
that
didn't hire,
price.
we didn't hire them as a lawyer to be town council or for labor. We
That's why I
hired
didn't
them
put
as
it
an
on here. Maybe I should've.
investigator.
It's still a legal
So
expense.
if we hired a private investigator that wasn't a lawyer, it would have been under investigations, in my opinion, and not part of legal expense. Because that's how this board and how Mark presented it, I believe, to the FinCom when you needed a reserve fund transfer.
I asked for it to go into the legal budget.
Oh, did you?
I did.
That's the logical place for it.
Okay.
But I
So
thought you
anyways,
wanted a
it's an
comparison.
investigation.
I just want to say, the board asked for comparison between KP and Brooks Durensis, so I did not put that in this analysis. If you want it in there, we can add it.
Well, we just, when we're looking at our, when I hear you say the total legal expense,
I should have said for council.
we either need to get the right name on it or include all that cost.
Understood.
Otherwise, we're just confusing the public and everyone else in terms
And
of
me.
what the right number is.
Yep.
So I definitely support that this needs to be looked at and presented in a way that the comparisons, we can pretty confident that we've got oranges and oranges when we're looking at these numbers.
So with the board's okay, I'll bring this back on the 17th.
I still have some
Are there other
comments.
Not the
questions
10th.
that we wanna?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think Becky.
Go ahead, Becky.
I agree that we need to have better figures to make the comparison, but I also, I know that we made a conscious decision, whenever we did it last July or August, to hire a different firm that we knew was going to cost more money. I think it's important for us to pay attention to our sense of satisfaction or not with the service that we are paying for. And in particular, to realize that the $30,000 expense on the one legal case where the file was not available, could not be found at KP and had to be reconstructed, that case is set to go to trial in September, so that I think I would need a lot of convincing to think that we should now again change attorneys with that case set to go to trial in September, having spent this much money to get ready for that. The other thing I would like to just confirm, I believe we had a memo or a statement from Paul Durensis that in the absence of any action by our board, the current arrangement will continue with both Brooks and Durensis as our town council and KP as our labor council. Is that in fact our understanding?
We have a contract with them that says goes month to month, 30 days notice for termination of the contract.
And that
So,
is
yes.
also true with KP on the labor?
Yes.
So we continue with the retainer structure,
For
unlike
now.
last July when we kind of had that 1 month.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct. Becky's point is 100%.
And then I think another piece of the question at some point, probably not tonight, is it serving us well, and is it serving the town well to have that split structure? Because as Mark pointed out a few minutes ago, because of, I can speculate on a lot of reasons why some calls were made to Brooks Durensis that were actually labor related, as opposed to KP Law. And some of that, I think, is a lack of clear definition of some issues, whether they are labor or not. And we have, in fact, involved attorneys from both firms on a number of occasions, and that has sometimes been useful and sometimes has added to a level of confusion. So we will, I think, at some point we should address that question.
I agree with you 100% on that, Becky.
Are there other questions or concerns that folks want to outline before we,
Yeah,
for more information?
well, in so much as Brooks and Durancis is currently our legal counsel, and K&P is currently our labor counsel, that for the time being, I'm fine continuing on a month-to-month basis until Mark gets together his analysis that we've asked him for. However, I don't think it hurts to go to both parties, because they both engaged by the town, and ask Brooks and Durancis if they can give us a retainer that includes labor, not litigation labor, similar to that, and conversely, what that price would be. And the same thing to K&P. And then at the end of the day, we see what that number is, what it includes and what it didn't include, and it's not an RFP, because both of these individuals are already engaged by the town just to renegotiate the current deals that we have with them. And let's see what we get back.
I can do that.
Does that hurt?
Well, I guess I'm not sure why we're just singling out KP.
I'm not.
No, he said
Both of them.
No,
We want-
no, we're limiting it to two. Why are we?
Because then we'd have to put an RFP out.
No, you don't have to put an RFP out for legal.
Okay, so we could invite in whoever we want and ask them to give us a third
I mean,
one.
if you wanna rebid the whole thing.
The only
that's
thing I don't
another
like
story.
about the situation we're in is the two numbers, because your explanation was when KP was our counsel and we had a general labor question, even if it ran 120 hours, that was gonna be included within the retainer.
That is 100% correct.
So that's the kind of contract I'd like to see us have again, whether it's with K&P or Brooks and Durancis. I
Remember,
don't
the
think
original
that the
proposal.
savings is gonna be as significant as we think it's
Probably
going to
not.
be. Because there's a wild card litigation numbers all over the place here, adding to this number, but it doesn't hurt to ask the question.
The original proposal from Brooks Durancis last year only had a retainer for general legal. Labor, they did not offer a retainer last year. Labor was always gonna be $190 an hour. That was their original proposal to you last summer. But I can ask both, if the board wants me to, I can ask both KP and Brooks and Durancis for that breakdown, just so you can see it. See if it's something they would be willing to do.
So to me, I think, Josh, that's a likely next step. I think it makes more sense to hold off a couple weeks, get the information, and then we can reach out to them with all of our questions and concerns, as opposed to kind of trying to get two things going at the same time and ultimately confusing ourselves and everyone else.
Not like we won't be left without counsels.
Right, that's what I mean. We're not talking about a substantive impact of a couple weeks. Yeah, Becky?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I also had two other questions on this chart here. I don't understand the accumulated disbursements and the
Oh, that's it for,
deductions.
mailings, copies, if they had to file something with the Registry of Deeds, anything like that, we pay that direct cost.
Out-of-pocket expense.
Out-of-pocket expenses.
Okay, and what's deductions?
I made a decision on the bill that I gave to the board that stuff that they were billing under litigation should have been retainer. And so I made those reductions in the bill.
Did they agree with you on that?
I don't know, I didn't pay it.
Okay, so this could still be a matter of,
Correct.
So it could be a $2,000 swing
Sure.
if they say, give me the money.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Okay. Is that everyone's questions at this point that we
well,
need to
I think that disagreement ought to be sorted out.
Yeah?
I mean, whether these numbers are in there or they're not in there.
Is that to K&P or is that to Brooks and Durancis?
There would be no dispute with KP, they bill us $190 an hour, period. There's no
So you've
retainer.
answered the question.
Well, no, there's almost $1,000
I understand.
So Mark, can you, in addition to,
disagreement in here.
in addition to this other information, can you just reach out and confirm with them that ultimately they're in agreement with your
Sure.
changes to their invoices or not,
Sure.
so that we can put
I
those
just have
together?
one other
Yep.
comment. we had recognized that we needed a review of our policies, and I understand why some of that work was delayed, and it made sense. But the part that was done, the review and the critique that was sent back to Mark, that we only received last week, highlighted some really important issues in a couple of our rather important policies that do need to be revised. They are contradictory with each other, and we are way behind the times in having an up-to-date policy on harassment and bullying, and that's in conflict with our investigations policy. And I am reluctant to hold off on having that work done of updating that policy and reviewing it ourselves. So I hope that our delay on making any kind of a decision does not hold that work up.
My understanding at this point is that that work is scheduled / in progress. And I share your concerns. I think it ultimately makes sense to be able to review all of the policies somewhat simultaneously, so that we're ensuring that A matches with M and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. So, and I know Paul Durensis is here from Brooks and Durensis. Sorry to put you in the spot, Paul, but I'm going to. You made a commitment to us that within the retainer, that you would be working on updating and looking at the policies that are in conflict, to Becky's point, and making recommendations, and you would be performing that during June, July, and August. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, in your first month of service to the town of Groton was in August?
August of 2018.
So, by the end of one full year, as part of the retainer, do you commit to give that as a deliverable?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I will schedule this for the meeting of the 17th, because that's when the select board makes your appointments. So we'll bring it back then. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you being here
Very
tonight.
Thank you.
I'll defer my 7:15, I'll defer the rest of my town manager report to after the
Okay.
7:15 agenda item.
Good way to end.
I see members of the school committee and Superintendent Chesney here to update the board
Absolutely.
on the Florence Roach project. So if you guys want to come up to the table, please.
So in our recent building committee meeting, some thoughts came up that we might need to come down and just sort of recap where we are right now and how we got here, and answer any questions that you might have. I'm not sure, it's been a while since the town has gone through an MSBA project. We've come out of eligibility and we're in the feasibility stage. It's quite a lengthy stage, which hopefully will end up with a preferred schematic, and that would be the option that is the preferred by the building committee and the school committee to bring forward to the MSBA. You get into this process by filling out an SOI, a statement of interest. That was placed in the fall of 2016, and we were invited in the fall of 2017. At that time, the MSBA was very clear about why we were selected. It's very difficult to get in, never mind get in on the first application, and this was at the first application. Elementary schools, of course, have a much easier time to get in on the first application, the first time they put in an SOI, because their projects are smaller and therefore cost less. And the MSBA accepts a number of projects based on how much money that they project that they're going to have. High schools are very expensive. For example, Arlington High School is currently in the MSBA project. They just did their preferred schematic, and I think it was in the neighborhood of $300 million, $350 million for the high school of 1,200. So it's significantly more expensive than an elementary school. At the time that I was contacted by the MSBA, I went over the SOI. I was not even aware that one had been submitted. Again, it's not surprising that someone wouldn't have told me, because usually you submit 2 or 3 times before you get accepted into the program. So I went through it. I talked to the school committee members on the school committee at that time from both Groton and Dunstable. And when I spoke to the MSBA, they ask a lot of very hard questions before you are told that you're in the final round. So they started out with like 160 applications, they cut that down to 80, then they cut it down to 50, then they cut it down to the 16 or 17 that were invited in. They specifically ask, what's the financial situation of the town? Is it likely that the town will approve this? They really don't want to start down the path unless they feel like there's a good likelihood that the town will eventually want to fund the project. What is the town looking for? Why was the town motivated putting in the SOI? And at the time, not only the conditions of the building, but the fact that about 125 students from Groton were attending school at Swallow Union. And in the SOI was written as that it was the intent of the town to want to bring those students back into their neighborhood school. Those 2 things, plus the condition of the building, were the reasons that the MSBA funded the project. Now, Marlena Gilbert, who is unable to be here tonight, who is the school committee chair, did talk at length to the MSBA and asked them if they would consider reimbursing the district for that portion of the feasibility study that would look at the current conditions of the Swallow Union School and talk about, what's the condition of the roof, what's the condition of the boiler, what's the ability of the school district to deliver the program it wants for its elementary students in that building. Although that was not part of the original SOI, they did agree to do that, but they made it clear that the building portion of the project, the reason we were invited in, would be for the Florence Roach School only. The two mitigating factors were the current condition of the building and the fact that 125 of Groton students were going to school in Dunstable, and the desire of the town to bring those students back in. So that is where we are now. I want to make it clear, if you've not ever experienced an MSBA building project, that at the end of feasibility, they could tell us if we were not in agreement as to what the preferred schematic was, and the preferred option that we would have for the building. So one option may be to renovate the building. One option may be to knock the building down and build a K-4 school. One option may be to move some of the students into the middle school south and build a smaller school. We have to look at all those options. There might be different sites. We own land at the high school. The town may, and this building committee and the school committee may want to look to see whether that would be a cheaper or better alternative than to build right on the site that's there. I'm not proposing that we go with any of those. I'm just telling you all the variety of options that we have to look at. If at the end of that section, the building committee and the school committee were to select an option that the MSBA did not feel was the most appropriate and one that they would want to fund, they can withdraw us from the program. So if for some reason we were to decide, and because they asked me very clearly 3 or 4 times, were we looking for a consolidation of both schools into one school? Because they have not been successful with that. And they spend a lot of money getting districts through the feasibility process to not come out the other side with the building. Ipswich and Amherst being the 2 most recent. Ipswich, they were combining 2 schools that were literally a mile apart, and they could not they went all the way through preferred schematic. They said we should put it into one, and they couldn't get the town to pass it. Amherst was supposed to take 4 crumbling elementary schools and put it into one. They could not get the town to pass it. So they asked me several times if that was an option. It was not how the SOI was written, and when I talked to the school committee members, when I talked to members of the community in both towns, and I think Ryan can speak to what the select board and the finance advisory board said in Dunstable. That was not something that Dunstable did not enter. They did not sign No one in Dunstable signed off on this SOI. That was not, the SOI was not written that way. So we are at a point where we are beginning the feasibility. We've hired an OPM. We're looking at the designers. We've put out an RFS for designers, and that's where we are. And it seemed like there was some confusion based on our last building committee meeting about where we were and what we had in front of us. So we wanted to come here tonight to try to clarify and answer any of your questions.
So, my name's Ryan McLean, I'm on the school committee. I've met most of you, except John, congratulations, and
Thanks.
being clerk too, it's great.
That's what I was shooting for.
That's why you ran, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm here to provide context from Dunstable. We had very lengthy discussions about participating in the feasibility study for the Florence Roach project. As a school committee member, I can say we're very excited to address Florence Roach and make sure that Groton has an excellent school for its excellent students. The conversations were difficult in Dunstable. Why were we involved? What was going to happen? Why isn't this a Florence Roach project? And we made very strong arguments that we wanted to assess our school, Swallow Union, especially if Groton students were going to leave, what type of configurations might help fill the Swallow Union building. And there's a strong appetite in Dunstable for some of our fifth graders, definitely, and maybe even sixth graders to come back. So a lot of those allowed us to help with the feasibility study and its funding. So I'm here to provide any context in terms of Dunstable's participation in this, and of course can also speak to the school committee side as well.
Great, thank you guys for coming. Yeah, Becky.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, what we are headed to is having all of the Groton Elementary School students educated in Groton.
Yes.
And in some ways, unraveling our district. I mean, we're a regional district with 2 towns, and for many years, Groton kids have gone to Swallow Union School. But because of the state's preference, that really will not be an option with this construction project.
It wasn't the state's preference. That's how the SOI was written. So
Okay.
that's what they accepted us into the program as. And if we were to change that, at the very least, the district would have to pick up that portion that did not match the SOI, the cost of that portion of the building and the whole project. So there's a construction portion, and then there's another portion for fixtures and all that other stuff that's about 25% on top of the construction. So it's not as if the state said, we put in an SOI that said we wanted to bring those students home. Actually, that was put in before I got here, so
Right.
I say we, but I have to read what's in the SOI and look at the intent of how it was written, and it clearly states that that was one of the number 1 reasons to put in the SOI.
So, we're proceeding down a path, we're partway down a path that says this project will be for all of the Groton Elementary School students to be educated in Groton.
That's correct.
And that means Groton will pay 100% of the cost?
Well, a portion of it is funded by the state, which right now about
But
48%.
I mean, this will not be divided in any way with,
Not
be
the
shared with Dunstable.
construction and the project costs. The feasibility cost is borne by both towns.
Right.
Because the money was taken out of excess and deficiency to pay for it, and that money is
Right,
part of the
I
district.
understand that, okay.
So that is offset also by the fact that you're paying for Swallow Union right now. If there's no Groton students in Swallow Union, you would no longer pay
After
those
the-
costs as
right.
well. So that money would be
Right.
returned for your one.
So I guess, you answered a little bit of my question, but my understanding is that just the K-4 grades in Dunstable is not going to be enough children to interest the state in any kind of an improvement of that building, or maybe there won't need to be any improvement of that building.
So the state's not interested in improving Swallow Union because it doesn't need it. So MSBA is only looking at the most needy of schools. In fact, we might be on the border of whether or not it's needy compared to some of the terrific schools that are around the state. So because the Swallow Union is in need of repair, we would never have even been considered by the MSBA, which of course gives you almost half back in
Right.
terms of funding, so you're talking a massive incentive to do so. So we wouldn't get funding for Swallow Union because the school is viable. The reason why we wanted to participate in the process, especially the feasibility study, is if the Groton students are being removed, then what is the best for the district? Which
Right.
may be, and likely would be, a grade reconfiguration, which is a good educational outcome, plus helps with finances in both
Right.
towns.
I guess I should perhaps have preface this by saying I was involved the last time. No, not the very last time this district went through the SBA. I was involved in building the middle school, the first one, and bringing the children together from both towns was seen as a goal at that point. And in some ways, this is a more splitting of kids. I wasn't involved in the decision-making around the SOI. I understand the process. I just want to be clear about what we're headed for at this point.
Right, it's not uncommon for, we have, the principal actually at Florence Roach came from the Hamilton Wenham School District. And they are very similar in the sense that they have an elementary school in Hamilton, they have an elementary school in Wenham, and then they go to middle school and high school together. So there's not an intent to break up the district, but there is an intent for the youngest of students who are usually most affected by being in a community school or not being in a community school to have a community school of their own. And as Ryan has stated, it was very clear from my talking with the Dunstable people that they were very interested in bringing their fifth graders back, and that was once a K through 8 school at one point. But as the enrollment went down, it became a K through 6, and then it became a K through 4. At least that's what the principal tells me. Pete Meyerson's been a principal there for like 17 years. So at
think
the,
it was ever K to 8.
oh, that's what he told. At the very least, it's not uncommon for schools to be K through 6, and there are many school districts that are, looking at other options too. But K through 6 is a normal, or at least K through 5, if not K through 6, is a normal configuration for elementary school. So that's where we are right now.
As a committee, we want to see the analysis from the feasibility study. So
Right.
they're going to say, money and educational outcome, K through 5, K through 6, and all the different configurations. We want to see that, to see what it is before bigger decisions are made.
John?
I'm very concerned that we're talking about spending a very significant amount of money. And instead of going at it from the perspective of looking at our district and saying, if we're gonna move buildings, we're gonna build new buildings and so forth, what's gonna give us the very best that it can to help keep costs down and continue to provide a superior education to our students. And so hearing that the driver here is some body of people who have an interest in bringing just the Groton students back really concerns me, because I don't know that in doing that we're looking at what's the most economical way from a structure and building and so forth to see the district grow as we move into the next few decades.
Right.
And that really, really concerns me to
Right.
almost
And
to
I
the
don't know
point
that
of.
that's not the case. Could you
So
want?
we're very happy to have the Groton students in Dunstable. It's worked out very well. That's not coming from the Dunstable side, that's coming from the Groton parent side.
I don't know where it's coming from, okay, but it's coming from some subset of families, I guess.
And I'll be honest,
I
I
am
had the
assuming.
same question in the school committee, why is there is this call?
Right.
But there is, and that's the way the statement of interest was written.
Right, so
But
I'm
it-
even thinking that what we maybe our best course of action at this point is to withdraw our application, not go and spend the money on this analysis that's gonna take 2 years and cost $200,000 plus, if I got that number
$750.
reasonably close.
750,000 in total.
So if you do so there's a lot of risk to withdrawing Fennell, and I know that you know a lot about this as well, but the risk is not getting again into the MSBA, and then of course delaying the construction project for for many, many years. Without MSBA, it's gonna cost twice as much. It's, I don't wanna call it a miracle, but it is very good that you got in this early and can fix what is a problem with Florence Roach.
Can I interject too? One of the parts of the result that's the preferred schematic would have to be the one that was the most cost-effective. So it may very well be the most cost-effective to stop busing students from one side of town, from one town to the other at the elementary level. It may be most cost-effective to move the 4th and 5th grade students that we're currently busing from Dunstable to Groton back to Dunstable and not having to bus them as far. And then by doing that, open up room in Middle School South so that the 4th grade students that are currently in the Florence Roach School could go into that school, and the building would be smaller than therefore, so then we would be at full capacity. We're just moving students around, but we may save money from transportation. We may save money in building costs because that building desperately needs to be fixed. It's got more problems than I have time tonight to tell you about. But you may be able to build a smaller building by reconfiguring grades, therefore getting a more advantageous financial solution. In addition, there is also a possibility that the state will pay for the preschool students that are in a separate building right now to build the 4 classrooms that would be necessary as part of this building project and to be reimbursed by the MSBA. And that building could either be repurposed or it could be sold, that land could be sold. I mean, I don't know what the town's appetite would be for that in the future, but all of those things have to be looked at. So this building, how this will end up has not been decided, and the MSBA will only help us to choose the preferred schema, and will only fund the preferred schematic that looks as if it meets the best educational needs, but also provides the most cost-effective solution at the same time. If it were for, in fact, that building could be fixed, I don't think you could bring it up to code, but if you could renovate that building for less than it would take to rebuild it, and that's what the town wanted to do, then that's what the MSBA would want you to move forward with.
But my concern is that we have already eliminated one of the possible solutions. We have all these mays, and I
Right.
agree with you, maybe, but we're not starting out with all options are on the table and looking at it that way. We've already gone and said, okay, the only reason that we want to build this new school or fix this school is so we can bring Groton students back to Groton.
And the building is in deplorable condition.
Which building?
Florence Roach.
Well, why do we want to bring them all back if, it just doesn't seem like it's been well thought out by eliminating a possible opportunity of consolidating all the elementary grades into one building.
Oh, if we wanted to build, if the building committee and the town, and if the town was willing to pay for the cost of building a new building, whatever
Well, see,
size.
It isn't a town, it's 2 towns. It's a
But
district.
The cost of the building will be done in, the building will happen in Groton, and capital costs are split up by enrollment.
And
There are-
that's because a decision has already been made
If
that
I,
closed the door
if I.
of doing a consolidation.
Oh,
Would you agree?
that's, the consolidation, yes, but there is not, the decision has not been made. If the town wished to build the new building and pay for the capital costs for those 125 students to remain at Swallow, the MSBA would probably approve that, but then that would be even more significant increase to the town in terms of your support of capital.
But I think John's concern, and I share it, is that it sounds like the SOI, which I'm not sure anyone kind of currently in this room had input into that. That SOI already eliminated a huge category of alternatives.
One alternative. The only alternative it is not allowing for is a consolidated school.
Right,
And-
which would overlay all of those other alternatives, looking at the high school site, looking at Florence Roach.
Right, but if Dunstable is not interested in funding a consolidated school, and they were very clear to us that they were not, then that alone, whether the SOI said it or not, that alone takes it off the table.
What if the feasibility study comes back and says in 8 to 10 years, Dunstable's gonna have to replace Swallow Union? What are you gonna do then? Now you've lost your Groton students, which are helping to subsidize it. Groton's on the hook completely outside of the state reimbursement for the funds from Groton taxpayers. Swallow Union loses the 125 students. You sell your soul, so to speak, to the state for the preferred design that they want for Groton, thus losing control over where the school committee and the administration may want to see the building go. Because the state's gonna fund it in one location based on their reimbursement level.
Right.
And you are taking a crapshoot on the vacant 125 seats to keep Swallow Union viable if you can't do a reconfiguration of grades. So, while this whole thing sounds great, to have excluded the consideration of consolidation of the two schools into one could be short-selling Dunstable down the road.
So, we had many discussions, so I don't know how deep you wanna get into the discussions of it, but,
Let's do it.
so, selling your souls, it's a little aggressive. So the idea is you need to pass a project that is needed, and you need to pass a project that would be supported by the communities. So Swallow Union does not, even if it is 8 to 10 years, does not need to be redone, so the state won't pay a dime. So if we were to participate in this project of consolidation, the Dunstable side wouldn't be reimbursed at all, so we'd be on the full hook. So if we're telling the residents, hey, this'll be a problem for ours 10 years from now, so we're gonna do it now with no reimbursement, I think the choice that the town would wanna make is to do the project 10 years from now when we would be reimbursed, because it would still cost less, even with adjustments that come
I
around.
agree with you.
But-
That's why to put the application back into John's point right now and take a risk at starting all over
But
again
another-
might be prudent.
But another issue that you have, and it's in all Massachusetts communities, is people do not typically want to send their elementary students to another town to be educated. And Dunstable residents have made it very clear to me as a representative on the school committee and to our board members that they would like to keep their community school. It's a source of pride, but also the educational outcomes in some studies have shown that students who have to go far away to school at the elementary level don't perform as well. So you have a very difficult time selling the elimination of a school, and that's not unique to Dunstable. That is across the board. I have experience in closing schools is a difficult conversation.
Fair point, thank you.
And can I just say, also add one more thing? I know we've been, a couple people have mentioned a consolidated school. If the two schools were combined, you'd be close to 900. And everything that you will read regarding educational philosophy says that an elementary school at 900 is not acceptable. Elementary schools, actually the target size from an elementary school is between 350 and 400. So even if those students are brought back, and that's one of the choices, as I said, we could leave those 125 students over there. The state is going to hold you to two things. A preferred schematic that you can get your community to approve, number one, and that matches the educational program that you have put in place, number two, and actually I should have said the third thing, and something that they have the funding set aside for. So they have set aside the funding in their plan for a school that's supposed to have 646 students, I think is the number. With the possibility of adding 4 additional classrooms if we wanted to move preschool there. That's what the funding they set aside. So it's not like they're gonna dictate to us, we think this. If it meets those 3 criteria, you can pass it, it meets your educational program, and we have the money to do it. That's what they call a preferred schematic. So it's not like if we say, well, we like a building that looks this way, and they say, no, we like a building that looks that way. That's not what they're gonna do. If we say we want a K through 4 school, and they say, no, we want you to have a K through 5 school, and we don't think it'll pass in this town, then then that's not the preferred schematic. They're looking for something that you can pass through your town to get funding, that matches your educational philosophy, and that they have set aside the money for. And it has to match those three criteria. That's the preferred schematic. So if we go back and if we withdraw, it is likely, and I'm not exaggerating, I was in a town where we had to build a high school, and they kept putting in their SOI and SOI and SOI for 6 years before they were ever considered as part of the program, and that's a high school.
So I have a couple of questions. How do we understand, so you said 900 is too big.
It is too big.
And I, absolutely, you guys are the professionals. You said that the goal was 250 to 350, but we're talking.
350, sorry.
Okay. And maybe
around
I wrote it down
around
wrong.
350 is usually what's considered to be preferred.
Okay, but we're looking at 650, so already there's kind of a disconnect there.
Right.
So,
And then my other kind of category of concerns, or two categories of concerns in not looking at a consolidation, in kind of having that, our hands tied around that, is how do we look at operating costs? I would think that there's some economy of scale to having one combined school, and then how do we ensure that there's educational parity when we have an elementary school in our district of 200 students and one of 700 students?
Well, that would be one of the highlighting things for, in terms of the last question, in terms of the educational, what the educational philosophy says regarding the grade rate configuration. Because if you were to move fourth graders into middle schools, because if you were to move those students, so if you take 125 out, you're gonna put around 60 back. If you put grades 5 and 6 back to the Swallow Union School, that and the fact that we currently are taking up 4 classrooms in Middle School South, and there is still even room, but we would have to do a whole space analysis. But my gut tells me that we're gonna find out that there would be room to move 4th grade into that building. You're already talking about a smaller size school. Would it be perfect? No, but again, I only have to go by what the SOI was written before me, which was from the school committee that came in front of me, that school committee passed, that said that the town really, as Ryan described it, many people want their young people to be educated in their own town.
Absolutely, and part of my concern is that I don't recollect, and I may be completely off, I don't recollect any conversation in Groton
I don't either.
before that SOI was drafted.
I don't
And I was on the school committee at that.
Yeah,
But
that's what I was just
you
gonna
voted
thank you,
for
I was
this.
gonna
This
ask
is a
you, you
little-
don't know anything
This is a
about
little
that?
for it.
concerning to me.
You voted for it. They couldn't have sent it in if the school committee didn't vote for it.
You can't pin that on me.
So part of my concern is in terms of educational parity, that, we're gonna have one community that has a K-6 building with 200 students, and then we're gonna have inherently a different program in Groton, that we're gonna have there, K-3, and then 4, 5, 6 in another, but I mean, it just,
Right, and
I don't know how we overcome that,
These are, so,
and why we're not looking at,
just strongly suggest that we wait until the feasibility study plays out, because some of these questions will be answered, and then it's gonna have to be a conversation like, are we willing to accept that level of parity just to bring Groton students back? Or is Groton willing to invest in
both buildings.
both
but I
buildings?
think part of, and I don't think we're gonna necessarily get anywhere. To me, the concern is that the way the SOI was drafted, we've already had our hands tied, and that we're not able to look at a whole category or an overlay of interest
The only thing
that
that,
Groton didn't have any discussion or say in.
the only hand tying is that there's not gonna be a consolidated school.
Exactly.
But that wouldn't pass anyway. That's not gonna pass.
There
But
is another,
Dunstable's not
But that
interested
decision
in
was
that.
made, it seems like that decision was made without any input from Groton.
But how would you have convinced Dunstable that they would have something that they don't want?
I'm not sure we would have been able to, but I think it's important that we were part of the conversation.
But picture that flipped. So if Swallow Union needed to be fixed and Florence Roach didn't need to be fixed for 10 years, we wouldn't demand a consolidated school that you'd have to pay for fully. I mean, it's
but
just not.
I think there is another option, and I was gonna ask you, because, again, I was on a committee that expanded Florence Roach, and at that time, 500 was considered much too large for an elementary school. And after that, after I was no longer on the school committee, Lawrence Roach got expanded again and became an elementary school of about 500 kids. And now you're saying that we might actually be at 650 in one school. Is there a potential that that the decision would be made to have 2 elementary schools?
That's not something the
That's a broad decision.
Yeah, that's not something the MSBA has signed up for in order to fund. So could you? Sure, but the MSBA.
But under this SOI, where supposedly we have said that we want all the Groton kids educated in Groton, that automatically means
It means it's
they
being
would not be divided into 2 elementary schools.
So it means it's being considered. It was a consideration point for the feasibility study. So it'll be central to the study that what will it look like when Groton comes back and what is the best outcome for that? But it does not mean that that has to be the preferred schematic. So if the concern is we want to make sure the school size and parities and that is the overriding decision, then that decision can be made.
So
But you have different,
I guess my question to you is the people who are more intimately involved in this process at this point, is a consideration of 2 elementary schools in Groton something that people seem interested in, or has everyone pretty much accepted the 650 potential figure of a large school?
If the town of Groton said, we're willing to pay 100% for one elementary school and 52%.
I'm not talking about including the Dunstable students. I am
Right,
talking
and
about.
I'm telling you that the MSBA has said that they will pay for one school, of which the maximum enrollment can be 646.
So there is no option with SBA funding.
With MSBA funding, that's true.
For 2 elementary schools.
That's true.
See,
That's
and it
true.
goes back to what I think, that is an option that we gave up with this initial decision that we want all the Groton school kids educated in Groton. Because if we were saying we want a solution that is the best for the district, we might well have ended up with 2 elementary schools, one very close to the border between Groton and Dunstable that would service kids from both Groton and Dunstable, and one way further east in Groton that only had Groton kids.
There's no history in the MSBA of funding 2 school projects in the same district at the same time, other than large urban areas.
Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
I have to share with you a concern that has arisen just from this conversation, because 50 minutes ago, or whatever it was when we started, the superintendent identified that what is it, SPI, whatever that
SOI.
SOI.
SOI, Statement of Interest.
was written the way it is because somebody or some bodies decided they wanted to pull all the Groton students back to Groton. That was the explanation that was given.
It was written by the school committee that was here before I came here, and the
But then,
superintendent.
we've talked for 50 minutes, and I'm now coming to understand that Dunstable, as a community, has said, we don't want to do something. So it isn't the quest to pull back the students. It's a part of the district makeup saying, we're not going to allow that to be a consideration.
so that's a little unfair because we wouldn't even be considering this if you didn't need a new school. So Dunstable,
Wait a minute. If we as Groton,
so
is not right. What does the district need?
correct. So the district
We
needs
jointly own the district.
to upgrade Florence Roach. Is
So with the district, I mean, to me, the district has one elementary school that's in need of urgent attention right now, and has another elementary school, same grade configuration, that may need urgent attention of a similar nature in 10 years. And I reckon it may be 8, it may be 15. In the overall scheme of things, that should all be considered in one piece to me to be fiscally and educationally responsible. And the SOI has tied our hands to prevent doing that.
Well, we're going to be looking at the condition of the Swallow Union schools. Without this feasibility study, we would not be looking at the conditions of that school. We are looking at the conditions of that school, and we'll know whether it's 8 years or 15 years. We'll also know what the, this part of this feasibility study will be to outlay what the elementary program should look like for the Groton Dunstable Public School District, and whether either or both or neither of these buildings can support what that vision is. And that will be open to the entire community to have input on.
But that vision is already going to have, if we wanna be successful in securing MSBA reimbursement, that vision and all these other pieces have to be shoehorned into, we're only looking at a building that serves 2/3 of our students,
But,
period.
but we wouldn't even be considering MSBA funding if you included Swallow Union. They're not gonna pay for that building. It's just, it's not in need, although it might be 8 to 10 years and that may be or may not be fiscally responsible, it wouldn't have passed because it's not in need of repair.
It wouldn't
So
have,
maybe the solution, and I'm pulling things out of the air, maybe the solution would be for the town of Groton to spend $2 million right now on stopgap measures to get Flow Row through another 8 to 10 years, and then we look at the whole district. All these things were taken out of our hands for
but you could
consideration.
decide that, at the end of feasibility, you could say,
Having spent-
this is what I want to do. It won't be MSBA reimbursable for the $2 million that you're talking about, but if at the end of the feasibility study, you wanted to say, as a town, what we want to do is sink $2 million into this building, which won't be up to code. So I'm not sure if you'd have a problem there, because if the amount of money you're gonna put in the building exceeds the value of the building by a certain percentage, or if that percentage of the value of the building can trigger that you have to come up to code.
It's a 3-year window and
Right,
2/3
so
or 3/4
all I'm
of the
saying
value.
is, all I'm saying to you is that could be an option. This town could decide that it wants to sink $2 or $3 million into that building to bring it, to do whatever it needs as a stopgap measure, and then go back for reimbursement.
But we
At
would've-
least a portion of the feasibility study would have been paid for by MSBA, 48% of it. They will reimburse you for 48% of it.
It's for $375,000.
But,
So
so we
it-
would have
it-
spent a lot of money on the feasibility study only to make that decision, which we could make without the feasibility
Well, but you
study.
don't know you don't know whether it's 2 million or it's 10 million.
Right.
There are bubblers that don't work, there are bathrooms that don't work, there's asbestos. Anytime we have to have the HVAC system fixed, we have to get people that are hazmat certified, because it's the crawl space is all hazmat, everybody has to be hazmat certified to work in there. So we don't know right now whether it's 2, it's 20, or it's 200. That's what the feasibility study is all about, and the MSBA has agreed to pay for 48% of that.
And just to, I'm very hesitant to, Groton needs to make Groton decisions, and I know that I'm a Dunstable rep, but Florence Roach needs to be updated now. Like, this has to happen now, and the feasibility study is forcing that's, like, it needs to be addressed. The feasibility study is at least gonna give us information. That's why Dunstable fought to be a part of the feasibility study as well, because we weren't going to be. It was just gonna be looking at Florence Roach and not assessing Swallow Union and maybe seeing if there are other options. So at least we'll have that info. But it's a little soon to say what the study's gonna come out with.
Yeah, I think, I remember hearing about the question of involving the Dunstable School in the study, and I think I understood, obviously incorrectly, that meant that this larger view of the whole district would be considered in the outcome. So, I think it's,
Well, again.
I understand, you guys didn't do that. It was done before, and I also believe, I don't know what kind of input was gathered in Groton, I don't remember anything.
So can I just, a couple other things I want to call to your attention. The portables that are in Florence Roach are well past their
Yes, I know when they came.
their feasible life, all right? Next year, we're adding another kindergarten, and we're within a breath of having music and art teachers have to be on a cart, because that building is getting overcrowded. So I don't, to say that we'll just put $3 million in there as a stop, and it's not like I got classrooms sitting at Swallow Union that are open, waiting for students for me to change the property lines, the redistricting lines, to move those students over. So we're rapidly at a situation where we have to do something. we're opening another kindergarten. This will be the last year that those music and art teachers will have their own room. If I have to open one more classroom in that building, I'll either have to redistrict, or those music and art teachers will have to go around. And we have portables that really we shouldn't have any kids in, because they're well past their usable life. So it's not like we have a lot of running room here. And those are all other reasons. So it wasn't just bringing the 125 kids back. It was, here's all the conditions of the building, here's the problems that need to be addressed. These problems are really serious, and if we're going to do that, the town of Groton would be more likely to fund it if they were only funding the capital expenses for a school in this town, and not doing part of the work in Dunstable and a part of the work here. I hear that there is a perception that just having a bigger school for everyone would be more cost effective. And while it may be cost effective, I find it to be educationally unsound.
Yeah, Josh?
There's 500 students roughly in Florence Roach right now?
569, I think, today.
10% more than that. So basically, while you've said that a school district would like to see 350 as the optimal size, and that the state is funding 640 odd students.
Right.
The additional student load is taking the 125 back from Dunstable. So even at the current 540, 550 students that are in there, you're 200 higher than where you'd like to be.
Yes,
But you're used to teaching 550.
564,
In the
69.
program that you're currently using.
Right.
So by bringing back the Dunstable students into the new
The Groton
projected-
students into Dun-
the Groton students from Dunstable, it's moving into the 600 range, which really is an addition of 125 students.
Right.
But
Would
you're
that be my
already
first
used to
choice? It wouldn't
teaching in a
be, no.
program that's outside of the recommended level of
I agree.
350. That's all I'm getting at.
I
So
totally
you-
agree,
So
but
yes,
right, yes, but I don't think that what was presented to me is that there is no way that the town would pass a new building if they were still paying for 125 of the 270, 125ths of the 270th or something like that, 125 over 270 of the expenses for Dunstable, and that's the way the SOI was
I
written.
understand. So we're looking at then 48% reimbursement on a projected $60 million project, or roughly 32 to 35 million.
That's the
dollars
construction cost.
on new construction for the taxpayers of the town of Groton. And we kind of got pushed into this because of the way that the SOI was written.
Or you,
And
yeah,
submitted.
yeah,
and
I didn't write
submitted.
it, so I can
And
say sure.
I get that. It doesn't matter who wrote it.
Right.
What matters is that we need a new school at Florence Roach.
Yes,
So now, the type of school that's being built, we're kind of painted into by the way the SOI was written by whomever wrote
it could be a K through
it.
3,
Is that a
it
yes-
could
is
be a
that
K through
yes?
4.
Is that a yes or a no?
No, because there are options. There's not one option. It could be a K through 3, it could be a pre-K through 3, it could be a pre-K through 4, it could be a K through 4, it could be a pre-K through 5. It depends on what the town decides is the best
It
option.
could be in addition to the middle school,
So-
it could be something at the high school. I
It could
get
be,
I
it could,
get
those, all those things could be looked at.
All right, thank
So-
you, I'm all set with this.
Can I ask one other question?
have
So you just said, again, and you've said before, it's what the town decides, and we're all sort of saying, we don't remember any input into that earlier decision that what the town decides. So what is gonna be the process for town input going forward?
It's pretty heavy duty, actually. We have town people members of the larger town that are on the building committee. There will be tons of forums held. There will be, so when you look at athletics, what is the gym gonna look like? There will be people that get to weigh on that. When we talk about what are the science capabilities, there will be people there will be options for people to weigh in on that. When we look at grade reconfiguration, there will be many, many options for people to weigh in on that. There will be public hearings, and when I've done buildings in the past, I've done coffees in people's homes, I've gone out to different organizations in town. I'm happy to run as many public forums as people want to have. We're also looking at a piece of software that allows people to debate, to enter that kind of information in, and it actually will go through some analytics to look for common themes and on the kinds of things that our people are putting forward, and that will be part of the process. So for those of people who feel it's better to do on their couch than to come out to, you know, a meeting, we're gonna look at that option as well too. So that's why feasibility study is a long process. It takes about, you know, I think it's about 18 months, 20-month kind of process. So it shouldn't be done. So that there will be all kinds of opportunities to weigh in. And if in fact the SOI was totally off the mark and the town of Groton is not interested in doing any work to Florence Roach, then they can certainly be that made known loud and clear.
I
and
don't
we
think
have
there's
to do
any
anything.
question of that, and I understand we've given you guys a hard time here tonight, but
had a great
I
time.
don't believe there's anyone who thinks that the Florence Roach does not need to have work done. I would really not want you to go away with that. I do think it is chronic in local government that you do a ton of effort at outreach and educating the public, and still people will stand up and say, I never heard about this, how come you didn't
Well, I
ask
kind of
me?"
feel like that right now.
I understand, we're doing that to you. So that's why I'm asking, going forward, and there will be a lot of outreach in what sort of a time frame between now and 18 months, or
Yeah,
now and 12 months?
When the feasibility study comes out, it'll be well known to everyone.
No, but how
Right,
you
in the
get,
process,
how you get to the point of deciding what the town sort of,
we won't be in
wants.
we won't have chosen the preferred schematic for at least 12 to 16 months and probably longer than that.
and as part of choosing the preferred schematic, that's when the town's input is desired.
All the way along. It's not like it's done in isolation.
So over the next 16 months.
Yes, we will have an educational visiting, we will talk about what we want the educational program to look like for elementary students. We will talk about the pros and cons of all the different kinds of grade reconfigurations. At the same time, the engineers will be looking at the buildings, they will be talking about what kinds of things need to have to do the buildings. This is not my first time around this block and looking at that building. I would say that we're gonna come out with a cost to bring it up to code, that it's gonna be, and bring it big enough
Right.
for the students that it's gonna be more than the cost to replace it, no matter whether you build a
Right.
pre-K through 4 or.
And I'll just say, my final comment here is, I understand that exactly this problem of having gone through a lengthy process and trying to sell a project to two different constituencies that is gonna bring them together and have it fail is exactly why the state doesn't want us to go that route, because it could happen.
It could.
John?
I got a couple of things. I keep hearing this term, Groton's gonna build a school. That's not what I think's gonna happen. I think the district is gonna build a school, not Groton, not just the Groton residents. The payment for the building will be assessed in the same manner that current costs, just
No.
like the high school.
No,
No,
John.
it's based on
100%
enrollment.
Groton.
Why?
But the formula is the same. It's just so
The
happens
formula
that
is the same, it
Florence
just so
Roach
happens that all
is
of the students
entirely
that will be
Groton.
in this building will be from Groton, and that's how capital costs are apportioned.
Well, maybe that's, again, another lock-in financially
That's the
to avoid having the cost spread throughout the district. Because first we say, oh, we're gonna bring the students back. Well, in saying that, we're saying, oh, Groton, the citizens of Groton alone are gonna build a building for
Yes.
$40 million.
Yes, that is the case. That was my opening question.
Well, but it's the case because, in part, we shut off the opportunity earlier to
Yes,
consolidate.
but the argument was made to me a long time ago, that if you live in Groton and you have to pay taxes to build a brand-new elementary school, and then you are told that your child isn't gonna go to that school, and your child's gonna go to Dunstable, you're probably not gonna be real happy. And I think that there is some wisdom in that. I think
I don't know, where the most unhappiness will be. Groton footing the whole cost of the building, not covered by the MSPA,
It
whatever
is covered, it is,
Or
it
we
is,
have to have some more students
No,
go
it is-
to Dunstable.
it is shared by MSBA if we follow their recommendation.
Well, if you follow the SOI that you put in.
Right.
Why
So,
does Groton want to build a school and lease it to the district again? The way Florence Roach, when we're trying to have a consolidated district, it's just, this, all of this is just not.
Well, you'd have to
it's just not
we'd have to
logical.
redo I think what you're referring to is that we would have to redo the regional agreement so that the capital costs are handled differently.
We just did the regional.
We just
I know,
redid
I
it,
know.
and I was on the
on the
committee.
committee.
And the committee,
I'm fine
and
with
the and the capital costs are apportioned based on enrollment.
Yes. So are we stacking a deck, so to speak, just don't overreact to that comment. Are we stacking a deck by saying, we're gonna bring all the students back to Groton?
Well, even if you left if you left 125 students at Swallow Union, you would have to pay for the cost of the building plus forever in time. You would have to cover however many students are over there, the capital costs that are over there.
John, I'm gonna be candid, Dunstable would be happy to keep the Groton students financially. It makes sense for us
There's
to
a
keep.
rolling average now of
think
student
5-year rolling.
population,
Yeah,
5-year
but
rolling
that's why I
average.
said
And that-
forever.
And that plays
There
in.
will be some portion, but as I said, that's why I said forever, forever. If you left 125 students there, you would pay for the capital cost of that building for a portion, 125 over 270 of those forever, plus the new building.
I think part of the,
I have another piece.
part of my concern as I listen to this is that it sounds like decisions that went into the SOI and potentially decisions now are being made not based on a regional school district and the educational needs of the students, but based on what the towns want.
So I just
And I
think,
don't think that's appropriate.
I think it's important to understand the MSBA process. So the MSBA would not entertain upgrading or replacing Swallow Union. They would not, it would not be involved.
Today.
Right, 10 years from now, they will. When it needs it, like Florence Roach needs it, they will. But right now, they won't. So we could build a regional school, but we're gonna have to do the entire thing ourselves. And I don't think there's the political appetite to do that. I don't. So the one that we do need to address is Florence Roach badly. It needs to be addressed now. Swallow Union does not. So it's not the towns that are, it's the way the state process works. So we can do it without the funding, but I just don't see it passing.
Because if
Tell
we,
me if I'm wrong.
yeah, if we had applied, to consolidate both schools, the things that you were talking about, the concerns, would be there, but on top of that, we probably wouldn't have been accepted because only one of the two schools is in dire need of help and is definitely overcrowded, or getting to the point where it's overcrowded. So the MSBA would have looked at that and they would have said, just redistrict. But I don't know how many more kids I could send over there, maybe 25, maybe I can get one more classroom, because I have one classroom that's being used for makerspace, and that could actually be used maybe for a classroom. So maybe we could have sent 25 more kids over there, but
So doesn't that then become the capacity issue that would be the kind of thing that would push MSBA to consider Swallow Union?
you have to remember that there's a long list of schools that are falling down around people's ears, so it's not just capacity. Overcrowding is, they say, put your art teacher on a cart, put your music teacher on a cart, do that for 5 years, then call us back. I've been in districts that the schools are that overcrowded. We built a school in Arlington that was overcrowded the day we opened the door. And they had to just put a 6 classroom addition on to it and pay the whole boat. MSBA paid nothing, even though when they opened the door, it was a problem.
I have one other point. A few years ago, it was identified that there were a number of empty classrooms in Dunstable. There were a half a dozen of them or so that weren't being used, because serious thought at that time was given to moving the early education school in the or the early education operation in the Boutwell School up there, and moving the district headquarters into the Boutwell School. And the only reason that was kicked aside, well, there were 2 reasons. One, and the first reason, the earth shook when anybody talked about changing where the boundary line was going to be about who went where, okay?
And we're not saying that if anyone's watching.
And the other part of it was, somewheres in that vicinity, and it may, I forget which is Swallow and which is Union, but it's really two separate buildings.
Right.
That in the building where the current classrooms are not, was some sort of an early education activity. and there was concern that there would be some competition. So I don't know what the state of those empty classrooms that we heard about a few years ago.
There are no more empty classrooms at the Swallow Union.
But we haven't increased the number of people going to Dunstable from Groton, because we didn't change that line.
Right, but the number of students in the Swallow Union that are from Dunstable has very steadily but very slowly increased. The other reason, and I hear you, and that could be that's
We
something you
haven't-
could
have we added
definitely,
teachers
we
up there?
could definitely look at. Again, Botwell, do you wanna move the Early Childhood Education Center to Dunstable? The reason I see that be problematic is because at Botwell, we only have 2 students that are from Dunstable, and all the remaining students, the other 50 students, are from Groton. So I could see that if I was a Groton parent, and I had my child going to the Groton Early Childhood Center at Botwell, I would not want to be driving all the way across to Dunstable to drop that student off, particularly since about 45–50% of our population is severe special needs, because that's what you must have a program for, and then you are allowed to bring in other students in. All the other students pay a tuition, but the special education students. So, you could move those students to Swallow. I don't know that would be something the town, again, 50 Groton students, only 2 Dunstable students. So I'm sure those 2 Dunstable families would be very happy, but the 50 Groton families, maybe not so much. So, but that is something that also can be looked at feasibility.
This is a time of hard decisions, friends.
Right, but I'm just saying, those are things that we
You
can
know,
look at during the feasibility
You're
study.
gonna ask you're gonna ask taxpayers of Groton to spend $40 million, or their portion of the $40 million expenditure. You better have a story that explains in depth and exhaustively
Absolutely.
what's going on here, because that's not
Absolutely.
what I'm hearing now. It's not
But
exhaustive.
that's because we're at the beginning of the feasibility study. If by the end of the feasibility study, we don't have the answers to the questions you're asking, you have every right to come out and say this town should not fund this, okay? But we are just beginning feasibility. We haven't even hired the designer who's gonna help us through feasibility. So when we get to the end of feasibility, we should have all the answers that you're asking for. I'm not saying that you're gonna like them any better 18 months from now than you like them now, but we will have all the answers to the questions that you're asking.
I'm not real comfortable with what's going on.
I
I'm sorry.
hear that.
And I spent 5 years on the school committee, so it's not like I don't have some feel for the kids. That was the only reason I went to the job anyway, was because I really care about the kids getting educated.
And I appreciate
But
that.
there's not a money tree out there.
I understand.
And we've got to look at this thing, if we're a team, if Groton and Dunstable are a team in this education business, we've got to work that way. And we just have to be together on it and make it work, as opposed to, I don't want this, I can't have that, it's too far to drive. Where do you gotta make the trade-offs, and the trade-off isn't just to keep coming back to the town and endlessly asking for more money,
That's not my
or to
intention.
Dunstable. The district needs to show the economies.
And we will do that through the feasibility study.
We'll see.
Alrighty, thank you guys for coming in.
Thanks.
Thank you for your patience.
Ryan, aren't you glad you came to Groton tonight?
I love Groton.
I love Dunstable.
Thank you guys for coming tonight. I know this wasn't easy for
Oh,
you.
that's all right. You
These
know what?
conversations need to be had.
Yeah, I was gonna
Hey,
say, and the
you
more,
gotta get it out on the
questions
table.
the more questions that we get asked, the better our answers get.
I look forward to the results of the feasibility study.
Thank you guys.
I'd like to jump ahead if it's okay with you, because I know the reason some of the people remaining in the room are here is to talk about the senior center and give an update. Pete, if you want to come up to the table, letting you know where we are with the senior center project. A lot of good work happened the last couple of weeks in terms of finishing the exterior of the building, getting the windows installed, moving in the direction that's very, very positive to get that building completed by our September timeframe that I've talked to the board about before. So I'm very pleased with the way things are going right now. I think Peter will tell you, as chair of the building committee, he's happy. Fundraising continues to go good, but Peter has some really good news from the state relative to the the project that I'd like him to give to the board tonight.
Right, yeah, thank you very much, and thank you I'll just take a few minutes here. We did get some really good news, I think, in terms of the funding for the emergency generator. Some of you, I think, folks are familiar with that, but we had put in a request for $92,000 in this year's state budget for a generator. Went through the House portion of the budget, they got $50,000, not the full $92,000. But Senator Kennedy worked on the Senate portion of the budget to add the additional $42,000 in, and it now is the state budget is at $92,000, and we're hoping that'll be signed by the governor. But it looks like there is a reconciliation between the Senate and House on that, so we should get that. That'll be a full amount, and that's money that comes off what we have to pay, out of the project budget for it, which would be helpful in the, obviously in the end, to the taxpayers.
Peter, that state budget with the 92 and it still has to go to the House.
Well, there are two committees that get together, they do a reconciliation
And
on
then
it.
they do this reconciliation.
Correct.
So while it's great news, it's tentative.
The word,
We've
it
still
is,
got-
until
Yeah.
it's,
You know
I guess
how the
until the
pol-
governor signs it, it's
You
tentative.
know how
But
the
Senator-
politics go,
Senator
right.
Kennedy was pretty positive that would go.
So it's great
go through
news
and
that we've
stuff like
made it to that step, but I
Right.
just want the people to understand there is another step.
Right.
And we've
Oh,
got.
absolutely,
We gotta
yes.
get through that before we
Right.
can say the money's in
That's
the bank,
correct.
so to speak.
That's correct.
We
But it is
hope it
good
will be
news.
there.
I think we're moving in the right direction, and I would say that the glass is at least half full on that.
Yeah,
that
I
account.
agree with you.
So,
It's a great,
think
it's a
it's
great
good
next
news.
step.
I would say it probably won't be less than 50 grand, because that's what's in the
I
House
think,
budget
yeah,
right now.
yeah.
I think
I
that's.
think, I agree
given.
with you on that.
right,
At
so
the-
I
at
think,
the end
and
of the
again, I think
day-
the general progress of the project, I think is, with the, we had a little snafu in it with getting the windows or the glass from the subcontractor who's providing the glass and everything. That's now been solved, so that's, glass is getting installed right now. And at some point, I would hope that board members would take an opportunity to go over and look at the project. and
We should
certainly
schedule
coordinate
a
that.
Are we allowed? I thought there was a
Well,
big
if-
fence.
Oh, no,
around
we can coordinate
We can
that.
coordinate it,
absolutely
if we
coordinate that.
coordinate, if the board wants to take a tour of that building, I can schedule that for you.
We can definitely do that.
Yep.
We have hard hats we'll give you and appropriate footwear and.
Some of you we
vests.
won't give a hard hat to.
I don't need one.
Right.
Yeah, I don't want you to think I'm being negative here, I'm not. I'm trying to be.
This is still left over
I
from.
just
the
thought I'm not a school
discussion.
committee anymore.
No, I'm trying
Okay.
I'm trying to make it visible. And, if we hadn't gotten Senator Kenny's help to get it up to 92.
Correct.
It'd never get considered again.
That's right.
So we've got another card in the game,
Yep.
and that's great.
And we should have an answer,
But
hopefully,
we all
if the
have to accept
state's
that-
timely, they're supposed to have the budget completed by the end of this month. And if that happens, we'll know for sure. But I
So
think it looks
even if
very
you
good.
only got $10,000, it would be $10,000 less that we have to spend. And if you get the whole shebang, then it's
Correct.
$92,000 savings on the project, which trickles back
Right.
to the taxpayers, or reduces the
Correct.
bond,
And-
the bond, once it's taken, or actually.
No,
we
we've already
took it.
finalized it.
Yeah, we've-
What it will do is it will allow us
To pay down.
it
No.
will allow us to utilize the funding that's left over when the project is completed towards other capital projects that will reduce that expense. For example,
Cause the money's been bonded.
for example, we have an approved public works project.
Oh.
So we would reduce the amount of money we would bond on that, which would save the taxpayers money. So
Gotcha.
whatever we get from the state is of benefit to the taxpayers of Groton.
Can I,
Send the governor a
And I
letter.
would also, to Mark's point, I would say, in terms of fundraising, I would have to say we've had some pretty good response on that, so I think we'll be in good shape on that.
Now, that's gonna save the taxpayers direct money on this project, because it'll reduce the amount of the debt service we pay each year by using the raised money to offset the cost. A lot of good news from the senior center project.
so I'm a little bit confused here. I dimly remember something about Groton Electric was involved
No,
somehow with
That's
that
the
generator?
DPW.
That's DPW.
That's
Oh,
the-
paid
two
$200
years-
for that.
That
Yes.
is a
Well, no,
generator, it's just in a different place.
Okay, so
And
we're gonna have two
twice as
generators in
big.
town. Okay, I got it.
We have lots
I got
of
it. Right, yes.
No, actually, Groton Electric was helpful in this project.
Well,
On
they
the
did
front
help us
end,
with-
they did-
Yeah,
they
but
did
with the
front end
generator,
and
the
stuff like that.
Generators
generator's
is
at the
Public Works.
DPW,
Yep.
and that's a large one too.
200,000.
And that's for like emergency when the power goes down? or
And it's
something?
also for them to, during peak periods, to generate their own electricity to help lower the rates. for the
Right.
It'll help us going into a new
Correct.
step,
Correct.
Right, and
Which we
this,
then
so
have to
this
live with for
generator
a
that
year.
we're talking about is the one to, allow the senior center to be a emergency serve place.
Correct.
Okay, got it, thank
Yep.
you.
Emergency shelter.
Thank you, Peter.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, board members.
Back to the town manager's report, which I'm sure everybody's been waiting for the last hour.
At least.
No humor at this point in the meeting, I'm sorry, I'll get back to business. At your last meeting, the board requested a timeline for the implementation of 24/7 full-time coverage, so the fire chief and I got together and we've given you this time frame. So on June 3rd today, the applicants are taking the test for the two positions. After the test, whoever passes the test will move on to a first round of interviews. That's scheduled for a week from today. A week after that, the chief will have his interviews. He will then, as the appointing authority, give conditional offers of employment of the two candidates on June 21st. We'd spend July doing background checks, physicals, the physical agility test that they have to take at the academy. And then on July 1st, the firefighters hired in January will also be attending the fire academy. So that's a 10-week course that they have to go through.
Can we
Please.
can we just point out to people that these firefighters that were hired in January were the ones that were approved at the fall town meeting?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, I just wanted, the reason I put that in there, and that's a good point, John. The reason I put that in there is because that has a direct relationship to when we start 24/7 coverage.
Right.
So that's why I added that.
No, I'm glad it's
Yep,
there.
no, it
But
is.
now,
Yep, please.
the two most recent new ones that we're talking about in those first 5 lines of
Yep.
this, are all the applicants people who've already attended the fire academy?
Becky, that's a great question. We have 3 internal applicants who have not attended the academy. We have 49 external applicants who have. So
So we don't
depending on
know.
how the chief decides to move forward with the hiring process and how that goes, we have the potential to have firefighters that do not need to go to the academy, which really helps with the 24/7 implementation.
Right.
I mean, if we do.
As well as not
and-
paying them for 10 weeks to go to the academy.
Correct, Josh,
Right.
correct.
And this schedule
Yep.
is dependent on that assumption. Because if we get 2 new ones and one of them's trained and one of them's already been to the academy and the other one has to go to the academy,
Well, I think what the chief would do is he would delay sending, if he has to send one to the academy, we would still follow this timeline, and we would try to send that person to the academy when it made the most sense in terms of less vacation time being taken and things like that. So if we had to cover the shift, it wouldn't cost us too much money in overtime. It's a very good point, John.
And does that academy run every couple months, or is it twice a year, or any ideas?
It's often.
It's frequent?
Yeah, it is.
It's almost on a 10-week.
Yeah, okay.
So August 1st is the potential start date, if everything goes according to Hoyle, for the 2 new firefighters. September 15th would be the return of the 10-week academy for the 2 firefighters that we send there. And it is the chief's goal and my goal that October 15, 2019 will be when we go 24/7 coverage of the fire department. Please note that when all this is going on, Patricia, Dawn, Steele, and Melissa and I will be in negotiations with the fire union to amend the agreement with the IAFF to implement the 24/7 coverage, because there'll have to be wording changes to the contract on how we pay out certain benefits. We don't anticipate it being a cost impact, because the salary is the salary, but we do need to work out those details with the fire union. So that's what's going on. And I'm very excited that we've started the process, and I'll continue to keep the board apprised if anything comes up during that process. Are there any questions? Okay. Item number 5, the board had requested that I provide you with a cost estimate to purchase 111F injury coverage. I received that quote today. To receive that type of coverage for police and firefighters, it would cost on an annual premium of $81,000 that would pay $1,000 a week of salary. So that $1,000 a week salary would be great, but our pay is, our average pay for the particular people that are out right now are between $1,200 and $1,600 a week. So the town would still have a cost. So for example, the captain that has been out for a year, if we had done that policy, pay the $81,000, they reimburse us $1,000 a week, we would then cost us another $25,000 to cover the salary, so it'd be $112,000, I'm sorry, $40,000 more. it'd be $112,000 to do that. So there would not be a $30,000 more, so there really wouldn't be a savings to do it. So I would suggest that we continue the way we do it now and not purchase that insurance. Yes?
Becky?
So, I think that this is a question that deserves a more in-depth study, because I think there might be other options. Correct me, maybe I'm not remembering, but none of our employees have any kind of long-term disability coverage in their contracts, right?
No, we do offer a long-term disability policy that some of our employees take that cover them should they run out of sick and personal time, that they would continue to get paid through an insurance policy, not through the town.
Right.
But
But we do not, that's an
benefit
optional benefit.
that they pay for.
Correct, we do not, the town does not cover any long-term disability.
So, I guess what I'm just looking for is a little bit more study, and maybe, maybe a couple people from the finance committee, maybe the chair and the vice chair of the FinCom would be interested in helping us explore alternatives for, is there any way to avoid the situation we have been in? First with a police officer, I'm aware, and now with a firefighter who's been out for a really, really long time with an injury, and we're just continuing to need to pay full salary.
No, the law requires us to do that.
Well,
I'm not sure what the chairman of the finance or the vice chairman of the finance committee would provide.
so,
In terms of
so are you saying
stopping
that the only options we have is this kind of insurance that really doesn't cover unless we pay a tremendously high premium?
There's no
Did-
work-
To get $1,000 a week coverage for our payroll, and there's a chance that they don't pay anything out if nobody gets hurt, is $81,000.
Right,
So we
but-
would be paying $81,000 in the potential that somebody would be out, and it wouldn't cover the two people that are out now.
Right, and it doesn't make any sense the way you've presented it, but are there no other options? When does, I don't know, workman's
There really
comp
isn't.
step
The
in?
Mass General Law
Doesn't cover.
Mass General Law states that when you are injured as a police officer or a firefighter on duty, you do not get workers' comp coverage. You have full pay while you're out. We owe you that money. And that's state law for firefighters and police officers.
Well, that's full pay and benefits.
Full pay and benefits.
And
The one
so,
thing that we don't do is we do not allow them to continue to accrue their benefits. So they're not accruing vacation and sick time while they're out on 111F coverage.
But the most expensive part there is
Is
healthcare.
Absolutely, that we
So-
continue to cover.
is there, I don't know, do all of your towns get stuck in this same situation
Absolutely,
like
Becky,
us?
that's state law, we have no choice in that matter. So I share your frustration 100%, I really do. Yes, Allison?
So, just to make sure that my understanding makes
Sure.
sense, I assume they cover $1,000 a week per employee. So if we had two, so basically we would have to continuously have
Two people.
one person out for a whole year and someone else out for half a year
To make that
to break even on annual.
Absolutely,
And I don't think we get,
I don't think we
over
get,
time, I don't think we approach that.
no, because I will tell you that in the
Knock on
time
wood.
that I've been, knock on wood, in the time that I've been here, we've had 2 long-term disabilities of police officers and firefighters. Unfortunately, they both happened in the last 2 years. So it's been a bad 2 years. I'm hoping that one of them is gonna be resolved soon. Have we heard from PRAC? Okay. We had the police officer go before the State Retirement Board last week. We're waiting to hear back the report. If that gets cleared, that issue goes away, and we're gonna be very, very happy. With regards to the other injured officer, there was a independent medical examination by a town physician on that last week. It came back that that employee is still disabled at this time, but there's hope that they will be able to come back at some point. When that is, we do not know. So we're grappling with that whole issue right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, they will, they're gonna revisit that in
60 to 90 days, yep. Thank you, Melissa.
Yes, John?
I think we maybe could ask the insurance company to take, we've got X number of police officers, we'll have X number of firefighters, all right? And there must be, some numbers around that say, what's the probability of injuries? So that we can get a feel for, you know, are we dealing with a 10% risk? That, you know, that we'd have 2 out, or is it a 40% or a 50%?
Yeah, it'd be good to get that kind of information.
So there's some, I guess it's actuarial type information to help us on that.
I think
John's
they,
got something.
Let's talk to Gower and see if they have any studies on that. There might be a study on that. That's a good point.
How many quotes did you get on that insurance policy?
2. 81
Did
was.
you get one through Maya?
That's the 2, we got 2. We got 81 from Maya. What, have we got the 81 from Gower? We haven't got the Maya quote yet. 81 was the first one I received back. But we asked both Maya and Gowery. Gowery handles our accidental policy right now, covers our medical for 111F coverage. So we asked them, we also asked Maya. We haven't got Maya's
Without
quote yet.
naming names, what about the white duck people?
Oh,
I'm just-
right over my head.
I was totally serious.
I know you were. Does Aflac offer that? Does Aflac offer that kind of coverage?
They offer liability coverage.
The disability coverage? Let's reach out to them and see if they have that type of coverage.
They pay you money when you're hurt.
They're
Time to
not.
sit around and watch TV.
Oh, Josh, they only offer disability coverage. They do not offer 111F coverage.
All right, well, it'd be nice to find out if there's other options
Right.
besides the 2. Because
Yeah.
maybe somebody will look at us as a good risk, looking back in time and give us a better.
They look at our most recent history, they would not consider us a good risk.
Well, that's why you should do it now, because typically the look-back period doesn't include the current year, it's the 3 previous.
All right,
Seriously.
we'll continue to look at this and get you more information. But right now, I'm gonna assume you do not want me to, well, I do not have a budget of $81,000 to cover that.
You would pick up a pre-existing claim,
They will not.
so it would just be to the future, and
Be
we'd
the
still be
future.
on the hook for the current ones.
Correct.
All right, gotcha.
Correct.
Next.
The board had also requested a summary of the OSHA requirements on the DPW and the building facility. I've given you all that information, and I'm sure you've all read it, I'm sure you've all studied it, and I'm sure you all understand it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have
I
on
think
that.
it's important, but so over the top.
It is.
Right.
'Cause
Josh, I
did
could not
read it.
agree with you more.
I did read it.
I know
It's
you
like,
did.
are you for real?
Yeah.
I was hoping for the 1-page summary, not the 20-page summary.
Of all the things
It's
that
just
the,
so much information
all
now.
the
that's
things
why-
that have been cut through executive order, maybe they'd cut back on this one.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, so when you look at the building requirements alone, you can understand why we had to do what we had to do with the DPW, the current building.
Yeah.
John?
Yes, John?
One of the things that, looking at this, did cause me to wonder about is what process the town has for doing self-evaluation on these things. And I went through and looked at a lot of it, and you're supposed to have a manual for this and a manual for that, and is anything going on within the various organizations
Yes.
that is taking a checklist and saying, we got this, we're working on these things?
Our
I
ins-
haven't seen anything like that in any of the goals.
Right.
Our
or
insurance
things like
agent,
that.
our insurance agent came out and has met with us periodically. They've met with department heads. We've sent 2 of our department heads, water and sewer and public works, to training.
I saw that in the bills.
Yep, for OSHA. So we are being proactive to make sure that we're meeting it. That public works garage was so far out of whack that we just needed a new building. So that's why that was done there. But in terms of the town hall and everything else, I know Melissa and Dawn have been meeting with our insurance agent to make sure that we've gone through this, to make sure that we're in compliance. And we're in pretty good shape with this building and our library and our new senior center. It's gonna be 100% OSHA compliant. So I'm feeling pretty
And our
good
fire
about it.
station.
But again,
And our fire
OSHA
station is too.
OSHA compliant from the structural perspective,
Correct.
right? But the OSHA compliance, a lot of it, what's in here,
On work, on the way our work is
it's
performed.
on how we store materials, it's on
That's
how
why
we
we
train
send our department heads
mechanics.
for training, yes.
Well, okay, so now they come back from the training.
Yep.
are they gonna start to work on the, on
Absolutely.
these things?
That's the whole goal.
Then that creates a really good opportunity for you and the department heads to create specific goals around the pieces of this, because we can't solve it all at once. And if we're serious in working on it, we
Oh,
can
we have no
show
choice, we
somebody
have to do that.
that we're working on it seriously.
Yep.
We're in much better shape
I agree with
than if they just went to the training and they come back, but
No,
You
they're
know-
tasked with implementing and ensuring we are in compliance. That is the job. We have
Okay.
safety committee meetings.
so let's
We
get
have public work.
serious goals, serious project
We do
plans
that.
around this.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. Any other questions? Okay. I'd ask the board to consider approving a one-day beer and wine license for the Groton Conservation Trust for the annual sunset event on June 13th from 7 to 8:30. I'd ask you to make it contingent on receiving the insurance because we have not received that yet.
I'll make the motion, but I have a question about the hours. On your agenda, you said 6 to 9, and in your
Oh, I'm sorry,
report,
seven
you
to,
said-
yeah,
and then
seven
it
to.
says 7 to 8:30
8:30 is the
there.
right time.
Along those lines too, the report says beer and wine and the agenda has liquor.
You know why? Because I put the agenda together before I get the final request.
Okay, so it is beer and
It's
wine.
beer and wine
From 7 to 8:30.
from
Sure, it's beer.
7, yeah, from 7 to 8:30. I asked the board to approve that contingent on receiving the insurance certificate. And the reason for that, or I could wait until next Monday and bring it back to you on the 10th with the insurance in hand if you'd like me to bring it back.
Make it contingent.
No,
Would someone
let's,
like to make a motion?
so I'll make it the motion
I'm
contingent,
fine with that.
so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And I'll just comment, I know about this event, and this event is open to the public. It's held at the general field where there should be a lot of beautiful flowers in bloom. You bring a picnic dinner and some other refreshments are available.
All in favor of approving the requested license, say aye.
Aye.
Very good.
Under other business, the board had asked to bring back, to continue discussion on a policy for select board meeting end time. I'm not sure how the board wants to go about that discussion.
Nor am I. So we had started a discussion around this. I think, John, you were the one who kind of
I
kicked
initiated
things
it,
off.
yes.
After we had had a meeting that went till probably 1:15 in the morning. So that was rough. On the other hand, I'm happy to say that doesn't happen frequently. So I don't know whether there's appetite to adopt some sort of process or policy around an end time. Whether it's a hard stop or a, vote to continue at XYZ o'clock kind of thing. For me personally, I'm not sure that there's enough of an issue at this point that we need to go there, but what do other folks think?
I think it's virtually impossible to, well, it's not virtually impossible. I don't think it would be fair to put an end time on an executive session that followed a regularly scheduled meeting. However, if there is no executive session following a regular scheduled meeting, then I think that no agenda item should start any later than 10:30 p.m. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But that doesn't preclude ending the meeting at 10:30 if there's an executive session, or the chair allows the discussion to go past such point by consensus of the board.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, so as I thought about it, I think that I remembered a couple of occasions. One was when we were reviewing the town meeting warrant with the FinCom, and that's like a public hearing, or maybe, anyway, it just went really late, and it involves a lot of people, and I think if we had put any kind of official end time, we would have made things a whole lot more complicated for us, because it's a whole lot of, it's not just our board, but it's also the FinCom that would have to find time to adjourn to or meet again. So my thought was that we should perhaps keep better track this year and see how often we end up going really later than what any of us would choose as reasonable. And I think we should
what?
It's like 7:45.
I think we should also look more carefully at scheduling executive sessions, because the times that we were in, the time we were in really late, we had a couple of items on the agenda for an executive session that we didn't even start until 10:40, and that doomed us. And I think there was another time when we went pretty late in an executive session, having scheduled two pretty meaty, lengthy topics at the end of a meeting. So I would support the chair's use of suggestive powers to, if you foresee that kind of a lengthy executive session, to suggest that we meet on another night for that purpose. And that we, pay attention during this year and see where we run into trouble, and if there are ways we can avoid that in the future.
Okay. What are your thoughts, John?
I'm happy that we're talking about it. I think there's some awareness that we've created. I think Becky's suggestion is very good, and let's go ahead and see how we do.
Okay.
So, I feel comfortable that everybody's in agreement. This isn't a pattern that we want to pursue these late night meetings. These are super late night
Right.
meetings.
Right.
Okay. With regards to your ongoing issues, one thing
Wait, other business? Is there other business?
that was the other
That
business.
was the other business.
No, I have other, may I ask a question
Oh.
under other business?
I have
There
one,
we go.
I
Yes,
have
you
one
may.
thing too.
My other business, so we're gonna do appointments next week?
The town manager's appointments are coming next week. The select boards are coming on the 17th.
Great. So, I noticed the building inspector is on that list, and it
Yep.
reminded me that that was one of your goals, to create a succession plan for.
I've solved that succession plan. I was gonna announce it next week. Ed Cataldo has agreed to stay on for one more year. So I'm very, very pleased, and I was gonna bring that appointment to you next week, and you ruined my big announcement next week. No, I'm kidding.
No, you just made it.
What's that?
You just made it.
I just made it. So Ed Cataldo is staying on for one more year at my request, and I'm very pleased that he is. So that's good news for the town.
So we should come up with another goal for you, apparently, huh?
That was my goal, Becky, and I solved it.
Okay, and then, at some point, we would be redoing our own liaison appointments. Is that coming up in the next?
Yeah, I'll
couple
probably
weeks?
schedule that for the night of your appointments, the 17th.
The
Do
17th,
liaison
okay.
assignments that night.
Okay.
If that's all right with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we get a list of what those current roles are, and so that we can all kind of indicate our interest and what we want to do moving forward?
Why don't I'll send out the current list right now.
Yep.
Okay, and then on the 17th, you guys can finalize it? Good idea.
Yeah, I mean, if people can respond back to you or to Dawn with, kind of your top three to take on, and ones you would happily pass to others or something, then.
Absolutely.
You got two things.
Okay, that was my other business.
Great, thank you. Yeah, John.
I have two things. I want to recognize our Veteran Service Officer, who was the adjutant of the American Legion folks here, and the American Legion organization, along with all that supported it, fire, police, Cub Scouts, the Memorial Day Parade. Becky was there, I was there, and John Riley was there, along with our senator and our representative. A lot of work went into it. It went very well, and there just a whole bunch of people worked real hard to make that the
Bob
good
Johnson
day
does a
that-
great job.
the good day that it was. And so kudos to them, and thank you to them. And the other quick item I have is, you all received a message today that Dawn forwarded from Amelia McCaffrey. 51 Hollis Street is a dwelling that for 18 months has been rehabbed. And apparently it was a pretty sad shape when it started. And the owners of it, who are the two folks, Brian and Amalia, are very proud of what's happened there. And I talked to Historic Districts Commission Administrator before I came in, and they're very interested in going. And so I would like to suggest for our board that, wait till they get a date set, and all of us that can possibly go on that we do that. And then if somebody just can't and wants to do it, that means they only have 1 or 2 single-person visitors as opposed to a dozen of us coming at all different times.
I believe it's on the agenda for the HDC at their next meeting to
Yeah,
make a
she
decision.
said that, okay. So, hold off on, until we get that date, and please.
I'm gonna skip that night because I've just spent a month and a half working there.
That was your job. You guys did a
Yes.
nice job out there. If I could go on to ongoing issues, we already talked about the senior center. I have no update on anything else, with the exception of the charter approval. I did receive word from Senator Kennedy's office that it's come out of the Senate. It's been recommended, it's going to the House, and they expect it to be approved by the end of June. So that's really good news. What I'm also would suggest to the board is that we hold off on finance committee appointments and let the new appointing process handle that this year, because the charter's approval is imminent, and I hope the board agrees with that, so we're gonna
I would
take,
suggest that anybody whose term is expiring to extend it for 90 days.
or something.
well, basically, they would have what is called a holdover appointment until they're replaced, their appointment would continue anyway. So the Troika will end up taking those appointments, and both members who are up for reappointment this year have expressed an interest on being reappointed. Did you try to talk him out of it, or?
No, I would
Okay.
never.
So both the 2 members who are up this year are Art Press and David Manugie, and both want to continue. So I think the Troika's work is going to be easy, so it'll be a nice transition to the new appointing process. So Alison, that could create a conflict
Yeah, we'll have
on
to
the
figure that out.
Troika. We'll have to figure out
Troika.
if the vice chair should represent us on those appointments this year,
Right.
to have 3 members, only because as the way the
In terms
Troika
of
works.
appointing
Appointing finance committee.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, only because of a potential
Right.
conflict. Because you may vote no.
It's not a it's the
I-
appearance.
The appearance of a
potential.
conflict, yes, the
Yes.
appearance of potential conflict. I guess we'll figure that out we'll cross that bridge when it comes.
Yeah. I hope we have that problem, because that means the charter's been approved and we're
Exactly,
moving forward.
exactly.
That would be fine.
So anyway, we will not be bringing the finance committee back to the select board. The Troika will make that appointment. The other question I have on the ongoing issue, obviously the library roof and the highway garage will be signing those contracts in the next couple of weeks to get those projects started. We've already met with our financial advisor on how we're gonna go about funding them, and we'll have a proposal to the board on a process on how we will fund those projects. Right now, what we're thinking of doing is short-term bonding until such time as the projects are completed, because they're only 6-month projects, and go out next February for the permanent financing when the projects are completed. But I'll have a whole proposal for you shortly, once we're ready to do that. The last 2 items on the list, K and L. Pepper landfill, I believe that project is dead. I'd like to take that off. And the board and committee appointing voting process was a previous board member's goal that I would ask the board, is that still something you want to continue, or should I take that off the list too?
I believe I was interested in that.
You still are?
Which one?
L.
Last
Oh,
L. I'm still interested in that.
Okay, so somebody has to take
so
the
someone needs to
leadership
take
on
the
that.
lead on that
Yep.
if we're gonna.
Okay, I will.
Okay, I'm gonna take off the
What-
Pepper
How do
landfill.
you, wait, how do we know that it's dead? What's,
I had heard that the developer has decided not to move forward and DEP wasn't going to grant it. That was my understanding. I don't know if anybody heard
What's the
anything different.
toxic dirt thing you're talking about?
yes. Has there been an official?
I don't believe
I
it's been
have, I
official.
haven't heard it's been polled. I haven't heard much of anything.
Well, that's what I
I
heard.
wouldn't take it off the list until
All right,
you know.
I'll leave it on.
Right, we haven't had any.
I will leave
official-
everything on the list. That's all I have.
I have a question, it's sort of related to the sidewalk installation. I asked this question before. The crosswalks, are we getting a lighted crosswalk in front of the Salt and Light Cafe?
Yeah, that is in process. We're waiting for that to come in. It's a smaller unit that Tom Delaney has ordered. It just hasn't come in yet.
Okay.
That's something that John has been very, this John.
Yes.
By the way, we're gonna have to come up with names. It's gonna be very confusing with 2 Johns on the board, I think.
We'll work on that.
Do you want me to
I started
change
calling you
one?
Jim. I started calling you
You
Jim.
should
around
call
here.
him JR.
JR, there you go. But yes, Becky, that is something that's going to happen.
Thank you.
Sorry.
It's okay. Good.
That's all I have, Allison.
Your middle initial begins with your rank?
My middle initial?
Yeah,
No, it's F.
oh, it's JF, not JR.
What's your rank in,
Grand Exalted Poobah.
So that, you're the G,
Sergeant, but I'm getting away
so
from all
can we
that,
call you
Josh.
Sarge?
All of that, I'm getting away from all of that.
Do we have any liaison reports? Not seeing any, then I would.
I
entertain-
can simply indicate that the Master Plan Implementation Committee keeps limping along.
The which committee?
The Master Plan Implementation Committee, of which
Ah.
I am the select board
Mhm.
participant. The effort now is to try and draw things into a conclusion, and hopefully by the end of the summer, there's a report, and that's, you know, the end of that initiative. But it's slow going.
Yes.
But that reminds me, we all got invited to a housing production kickoff study, something on Thursday, June 27th at 7 PM?
Yep.
In this room, maybe?
That is correct.
Oh,
All right. We have 4 sets of minutes, 2 regularly scheduled and 2 special meetings.
I move that we approve the regularly scheduled meeting minutes of April 22nd, 2019.
Second.
All right. Does anyone have any corrections or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
I move that we approve the special meeting of April 29th, 2019.
Second.
Does anyone have any corrections or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
And I
May
wasn't
6th.
at the next meeting.
Okay, I will move that we approve the minutes of May 6th, 2019.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Did you get that done?
I bet you did. And then we have one last set of May 15th.
I move that we approve the scheduled meeting, regular scheduled meeting of May 15th, 2019.
I'll second, and I will point out, I had submitted a slight change to Dawn that she has in here in the packet. It's on page 2, and it's, the sentence now reads, Ms. Pine read a certificate the National River Watershed Association presented to the town for its work on the Wild and Scenic Rivers designation process.
All right.
Thank you, Dawn.
Change my motion to as amended.
Alrighty. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. And this meeting is adjourned.
Good night, everybody.
So-